Common comedy all over America's Funniest Home Videos and all kinds of places. It's like a universal thing that is laughed at. And so it's actually a very common thing, and people get a big kick out of it. And so for this to be a crime that is punished very, by saying severe, it has a severe consequence. I'm not saying God's punishments are over severe. I'm not saying the punishment doesn't fit the crime, but we might think so, okay? And that's what we need to wrestle with. When something seems out of proportion or severe or archaic or backward, we really need to check ourselves and say, okay, then God sees something here that is that maybe I'm not seeing, or we're just so far removed from a biblical value that we don't see it. So I like, sometimes people throw around this term family values or values. And I had a guy tell me one time, he's like, no, it's not, we shouldn't talk about values, we should talk about virtues or virtues and ethics. But actually, I like the word value and I like the word ethics, and they're two different things. If you think about the Sermon on the Mount starts off with a bunch of value statements. Blessed, 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 or blessed if you prefer. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are they that mourn. Blessed are the meek. These are values. Who do you call blessed? Jesus says the poor in spirit is blessed. Well, people are like, well, I think the guy that is super self-confident is blessed. Jesus says the poor in spirit is blessed. Those that mourn are blessed. The opposite of what you think of being blessed. These are value statements. When in the Sermon on the Mount it deals with you've heard it said, but I say unto you, it's usually ethical statements. Like don't commit adultery, don't murder, don't falsely vow, etc. So those are ethical statements. One thing we want to pull out here, thank you, is the value of what's going on. Why is this punishment a very serious punishment? So the third reason we find it embarrassing is the punishment appears to be mutilation. We do not cut off body parts off as a punishment. If this literal interpretation is true, it is unique to a biblical law. So in biblical law, it's not common to have a hand cut off. So the woman who grabs the man striving with her husband, her hand is cut off, and that's very unique in biblical law. What happens if someone steals something? What's the penalty? Yep, return it and then some. Punitive damages. So you steal, you have to restore what you stole plus additional. Maybe twofold, maybe fourfold. That's really up to the discretion of the judges. The illustration used are sheep and oxen. 5 oxen, 1 sheep. That means that judges should consider, okay, well, sheep reproduce a lot faster than oxen do. So, two of them should suffice. Oxen, not only do they reproduce slower than sheep, but also oxen take a lot of training to get them ready to pull a plow. So if you steal an ox, 2 oxen is not really calculating all the cost. 5 oxen would be more proportionate to the thing stolen in punitive damages. You could apply this to all kinds of things. Stealing a work vehicle versus stealing a pleasure vehicle. I mean, if you steal a man's work vehicle, all the time loss, the tools that are with it, the missed job opportunities, all that should be considered, I believe, when a judge considers the value of the thing stolen and what the restitution should be. So to steal something is restitution. What's the penalty for murder? The life. You can't restore the person their life, but you could look at murder as stealing from God. God says life for life. You took a life, you forfeit your life. So that's the penalty for murder. Homicide, other types of homicide, accidental homicide is different. I don't want to go into that, but it's a rare thing here. But some might say, well, the lax talionis, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, those are body parts. Let's look at a verse that says that. We're gonna get into this text that we're looking at, the embarrassing one. But I want to make some points here. In Deuteronomy 19:18, we see what's called the lex talionis, in verse 21 in particular, it means the law of retaliation. And the law of retaliation teaches the principle of proportionality. The punishment should fit the crime. So it says the judges shall inquire diligently. That's an investigation takes place. And if the witness is a false witness and has accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him as he meant to do to his brother. So if a person perjures themselves and says, yes, this guy committed murder, and is proven that he committed perjury, whatever he wanted done to the person would be done to him. He'll be put to death. If the punishment was restitution, then he has to make the same restitution. That's the biblical principle of justice, is a false witness gets punished with whatever he wanted done to the person he was falsely witnessing against. I think that is a wonderful principle that should be taken seriously. I have a relative that got a 13-year sentence based upon a false witness. So I believe a false witness. So the false witness perjury is kind of a slap on the wrist. But in biblical law, whatever you wanted done to the person would be done to you. It's a very serious crime. So you shall purge evil from your midst. Now that's an important principle that's going to come to play here. One of the major purposes of biblical law is to put away evil, to purge evil. That you make an example by the punishment that is severe enough that people say, we're not going to do that. So keep that in mind. The purpose of the severe punishment, what we might think is severe, one of the purposes is to put away evil. So that people go, wow, the consequence of getting caught for this crime is so severe, I'm not going to do it. The exact opposite of this can be seen in California, like in San Francisco and LA right now, where if you steal less than $1,000, they won't even prosecute you. So the punishment is so low, gangs of people will go into a store, into a flash mob, they'll break windows, they'll steal a bunch of stuff and run out. If they steal less than $1,000, the police, they're not even interested, right? I know in the city of St. Louis, I've had things stolen, I've had damaged property, and I don't bother calling the police. There's just no reason. There's no reason to call the police. All that's going to happen is they're going to come out, take a little report, they're going to leave, and my insurance is going to go up because another crime is reported in the neighborhood. I'm not the only one. Thefts are very underreported in St. Louis because everybody knows they don't prosecute them. The police hands are tied. It's not the police's fault. It's the prosecutor's fault. And so they're like, they're not going to prosecute it. Why even take a report? And so we're like, why even call on it? But in biblical law, one of the purposes is to purge evil. The penalty is public, it's known, and it's severe enough that people go, crime doesn't pay, let's go get a job, okay? And then here we have the principle, and it says, and no such evil shall be committed among you, which I believe is a point of the cutting off of the hand also here. Your eye shall not pity, it shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Now, up till the time that the rabbinical interpretation was that this was not actually, you're not, if a person accidentally knocks out his brother's eye, you don't actually pay with an eye. It's economic remuneration. It's paying the person back. It was seen as the person should pay an amount that really restores the person and fits the crime. The rabbis, historically, eye for eye and tooth for tooth isn't taken literally. It was taken, now the one case I can think of where it was taken literally was when it's an act of cruelty, like a torturing dismemberment. So Adonai Bezek, I think in the book of Joshua, he had this habit of every time he would conquer a king, he would cut his thumb, the thumbs off and the big toe off, which would make them unable to grasp things with their hands and able to walk very effectively. And it was a way of humbling those after him. So when they took Adonai Bezek captive, they cut off his big toe and his right thumb. And he says, as I have done to others, so it was done for me. So if it was an intentional, like some extremely evil sadomasochist who tortures people, then they may have taken it literally. But if you accidentally knocked your neighbor's eye out or his tooth out, they didn't knock your tooth out, right? You financially made restitution to the person. And so the lex talionis, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, is the principle of proportionality, which means the punishment should fit the crime. We don't say, like in Muslim law, if you steal something, your hand gets cut off. Not restitution, your hand gets cut off. You don't see that in biblical law, you see restitution. The one place where we see a hand getting cut off is here. And so the principle of proportionality says that punishment must fit the crime. And that's where I think one of the reasons why we have a hard problem with this. It's a very trivial thing for a man to get kicked between the legs in our society. Now, I think that this is more too than just an injury. There is an intent to crush, to wound. But there's some words here that there's some translation things I want to look through before we get into really open questions here. I want to show you a few more things. One is look at the way ESV says here, when men fight with one another and the wife of the one draws near. Okay, the way ESV says it, two men, any men, could be an Israelite and a Moabite, could be two Moabites, could be two Philistines, could be anything. But when I got to looking up some things, and the one commentary, the one thing I found online that talks about this verse, I don't know what translation they were using, but they mentioned that the word brother is used, and I wanted to verify it. So I got here, it's kind of hard to see on the screen. Yeah, it's not a very good thing at all. The word is literally boy, if I had the Hebrew in there, I could show it, but it's too blurry for me to read. The word brother is used here. When two men strive together, man against brother. Man against brother is a more literal translation. Totally left out in the ESV. And one of the reasons why is because brother can be your fellow countryman. So look at the NASB 20, like one of the most recent ones. If two men, a man and his countryman, that's a whole additional phrase that you don't see in the ESV. If two men, a man and his countryman, have a fight with each other. Now notice I highlighted in blue, hard to see up there, that there's a footnote. There's a footnote there. Because the footnote will tell you, or brothers. Okay? And the wife of the one comes save her husband from the hand of the one who is hitting him, and she reaches out with her hand and grasps him in the man's genitals. Okay, the LSB, which I believe is the Legacy Standard Bible, which is John MacArthur's more literal translation. They took the NASB, they made some really important changes. For example, instead of having capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, the LSB went ahead and translated it Yahweh, which is a long time coming. I don't know why we didn't do that to begin with. But a lot of times they make some really good changes. And look what the LSB says. If two men, a man and his brother. The word brother is used there. Are struggling together. And then the Amplified says, if two men, a man and his countryman. I got to tell you, most translations totally leave out this phrase, either countryman or brother. So why countryman, why brother? Well, sometimes brother simply can mean the word akh in Hebrew, can be your biological brother. But just like we use it as Christians, brother so-and-so, or my Christian brother, or soldiers might talk about their brothers in arms, or two guys in the union. We'll talk about our union brothers. It can mean your countrymen, your kin. It can be very literal, a brother, or it can be your fellow countrymen because they're all brethren, all right? But it's totally left out of a lot of translations. I need you to wait just a minute, Dan, because this I want to show you. Anybody remember last time we had a Deuteronomy 25 study? Anybody happen to remember what our last Bible study was on? I want to make you think for a second. Yes, the law of the Levirate, right? Let's look at the verses immediately preceding this. I think it's an important textual clue here that is perhaps missed. These are the verses, the context. I decided to stop short of this verse. I thought, wow, there's enough difficult verses to deal with on Wednesday night, so I didn't include this verse. But I want to put them together. these are the verses directly preceding verse 25 that we're reading here. If brothers dwell together, brothers, there's your word brothers, dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as a wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother. The word is not ach here, it's brother-in-law. It is a different Hebrew word. But the first verse 5, brothers, is the word achim for the plural brother, just regular brother. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name shall not be blotted out in Israel. And if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. And if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him and in the presence of the elders, and shall pull his sandal off his foot and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house, and the name of his house shall be called the man with his shoe loosed. I didn't have that on the screen, but I remember it. Okay. Immediately after that verse, verse 10, we have verse 11. When men fight together with one another, but the one another is a man with his brother. And the wife of the one draws near to rescue her husband from the hand of him who is beating him, and puts out her hand and seizes him by the private parts. Then you shall cut off her hand, your eye shall have no pity. Do you see maybe any connections, any thoughts on this? You might have one, Dan. You had a thought on something. Yeah.
App.
Yeah.
And it shows, I can't read the symbols very well. It looks
A
like
footnote.
it looks like two N's and an X. The Hebrew word.
Two M's and an X.
Two N's.
I don't know. The word is ach for brother. I don't know what word you're talking about.
Up here, where it says brother born of the same mother and father, also half brother.
Yeah. The word could be used for that, or a countryman. So countryman's not a bad translation.
Yeah, but it shows the actual Hebrew word for brother,
Which is ach.
I believe so. You know more.
Yeah, well, I know that word. So it's sometimes even, Jews will call it, ach katan, little brother, or ach gadol, big brother. It's like a very common word, ach. So, okay, before I anybody have any comments up to this point? I can connect some more dots, but thoughts? I had trouble hearing you, actually.
You're ending his future, children, his future family, his future line.
That is the potential for ending the future line, I believe, is in view here. The immediate verses before, if a brother dies, we had this strange law that inheritance is very important. And I think that one of the things that we miss, and there's a lot we have to learn from this verse, is the emphasis on being fruitful and multiplying and having children. The promises to Abraham. I want to look at how important children are. The reason why the punishment is so severe is that if she grabbed too hard and he was unable to have children, and that wife has robbed her seed, and he's robbed his seed, and God has robbed his. The reason God makes the two one, I have the verse later, is that he may obtain godly seed, Malachi 2. And one of the reasons we need to hear this is so, I believe when this law was given, it was shocking to the original audience. I don't think anybody yawned at this verse. These were not backward, hard-hearted people. These were people, because notice, the last words of verse 12, look at what it is. Your eye shall have no pity. God anticipates that this is going to be a very hard commandment. He wouldn't say your eye shall not pity if everybody was like, yeah, that makes sense. I get the picture sometimes with Muslims, they just can't hardly wait to cut somebody's hand off, or throw somebody off a building. Maybe that's a mischaracterization. But God said, your eye shall not pity. Actually, Tom, I think you had your hand raised first. Let me get you.
It kind of goes back. It was a couple chapters back we were talking about it, but it not only are you potentially ending that line, you're also taking that man's ability to participate in the civil government, because I believe if you have that type of injury, you can't even participate, and you're not even allowed to have a say in any laws that get passed or in anything else that happens.
Well, you know what? I have the verse, and I just put it on the screen. But actually, you're right. That's a whole nother thing there. I was just going to point out again how important children are, and that you have another law, but you applied it. No one whose testicles are crushed or whose male organ is cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. So this violent act could actually keep them from being part of the assembly of the Lord. I mean, it's a very, the potential for things, this, and again, this is to put away evil. This is to be read. Remember, the whole law is read to all of Israel every 7 years. And this is something that fathers and mothers teach their children. Don't do this. It's very severe. Please, Kanoa. Microphone, yep.
And just how severe it is, that's what I was going to say. What would be a, like if people say, oh, for these crimes, for losing an eye, you can rest it, you can essentially pay your way out of it. Well, what would be the price for never being able to have children for the rest of your life, never being able to be in any kind of job like that? That's forever life-changing. So that would be, the crime is so severe that there's really nothing you can you can't pay anything back like that, and that's how, because of how important that is. And so I think that's why, the immediately of the cutting off of the hand shows the severity of the crime.
Yeah, it does. And you know what? You bring out something else that's very important that mitigates what seems like the severity of this law. This is the maximum penalty. So I think, if it were me, I'd be like, no, don't cut her hand off, please. And I think that would be most people. I don't want to, I don't want my brother's wife getting her hand cut off. It's going to make Thanksgiving really awkward. But it's like, can you pass the cranberries? It's like, I can't. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, without a hand, how would she fulfill her wifely duties? How hard will it be to nurse her child? How hard will it be for her to draw water, to cook? Well, if a man can't perform his husband's duties, the family line dies. You see the point? So when a verse is difficult like this, it's difficult so that we have this kind of Bible study. We need to wrestle with it. We need to ask why. And apparently not many people have. It's just skipped. And honestly, I think verses like this are one of the reasons why the new covenantal people, this is one of the reasons why the church as a whole wants to abandon God's law, because this is just difficult. But it's important to wrestle with it. It's important to think through it. Ryan. Go ahead and do that.
How about the fact that she's kind of castrating her own husband? When two men struggle, if you struggle, you should struggle for something you believe in. If your wife comes along and delivers you from this thing, you're emasculated in front of
Yes,
everybody.
in the metaphorical sense, it's emasculating. I'm glad you brought it up. I had another slide that I ended up doing away with. And I think that's another thing, is that this is an imbalance in the marital relationship as well. The man is in a fight, and the wife is coming to his rescue. I remember one time in church, actually, one of the brothers in the church, he didn't go to church with us anymore, but I don't know if he called me ugly or what it was, but my mother heard it. And she's like, that is not true. And I'm like, Mom, please, when guys insult each other, do not like try to save me, right? It's embarrassing. Mom, please leave me alone. It's like guys will jab at each other and that sort of thing. And sometimes moms and wives want to jump in and defend their husbands or their sons. And actually, men relate to each other differently than women do, and women should stay out of it most of the time. And I think the wife getting involved, it's like what like you're putting it, what an embarrassment to the man. It's like whether you're winning or losing the fight, for your wife to go in, the humiliation of, oh, what, your wife going to come and save you? Let me tell you, that is rough. So I think wives should be very careful about let men solve man's problems. It's not a woman's problem. She should stay out of it. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't forbid, if he's being beaten to the point he's about to die, it doesn't forbid beating the guy over the head with a stick. If he's about to get murdered, right? This also does not forbid a woman defending herself at all. This is very specific. 2 men are striving, a man and his brother. And I think the reason I'm emphasizing brother is maybe it does mean fellow countrymen. But because of the close proximity of the verses before, this might be a woman who's grabbing her brother-in-law and she's got something to gain from him not having children. More real estate. Because if he doesn't have children, who does the property get passed down to? And that's what I have not found anybody else saying. I didn't find any commentary, anybody making this point, but the verses immediately preceding is about brothers raising up seed to their brother so that they could get an inheritance. If your brother didn't have an inheritance, didn't have an heir, then all the property goes to the other surviving brother, right? And so there would be a motivation to do damage to a brother-in-law. In its close proximity, the verses immediately preceding, she would have something to gain by him not having children, which would be an even more egregious offense. It's not a merely, I want to defend my husband from his brother, but if my brother-in-law doesn't have any children, then guess who becomes the heir of the real estate? Our family. Dan?
On Leviticus chapter 22, verse 24, it says, anything with its testicles bruised or crushed or torn or cut, you shall not bring near to Yahweh, and you shall not do thus in your land.
Right. So like a sacrifice.
Yeah.
You were not to offer an unfruitful sacrifice. I'm glad you brought it up because, again, that is a point. It's a picture of also the priest. If a priest was emasculated, he could not be a priest. And spiritually, to be a picture of Christ, whether it be a lamb being offered or a priest, in a spiritual sense, Christ, his life is fruitful. He did not have a wife according to the flesh, but he does have a church. And through the church, he brings the Father offspring. So fruitfulness is extremely important. And this is really a principle that in an age where lots of people, you have dinks, dual income, no kids, people choosing not to have children, people taking abortion, abortifacient birth control that allows fertilization of the egg and then for that life to be extinguished. I heard somebody say one time the most there's like huge numbers of abortions taking place every Sunday morning as the service is going on. You say, how? Well, someone took a morning after pill, and a lot of Christians are using birth controls that are abortifacient. They actually allow the conception of life and then for that life to be snuffed out, which is, from a biblical standpoint, murder. And so this is something we need to think through. But even just the casualness, all kinds of ads, the casualness of getting, when I read these verses, I think it should make you think twice before you go get fixed, which is another word for broken. Before you go get a vasectomy or something. I think that when you see how much God values offspring and children, I want to read some verses here. I want you to, I just briefly look at them. I may not read them word for word, but look, starting in the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Genesis 9:1 and verse 7, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Verse 7, be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it. Genesis 16:10, the angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring. Genesis 17:2, that I may make my covenant between me and you and multiply you greatly. Verse 20, as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. Genesis 22:17, I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven. Genesis 26:4, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven. Verse 4 and 24, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham, your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake. Genesis 28:3, God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you. Genesis 35:11, fruitful and multiply. 48:4, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you. Exodus 32:13, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven. Leviticus 26:9, I will turn to you and make you fruitful and multiply you. Deuteronomy 1:10, the Lord your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are today as numerous as stars of heaven. Deuteronomy 6:3, that you may multiply greatly. Deuteronomy 7:13, he will love you and bless you and multiply you. Deuteronomy 8:1, the whole commandment that I command you today, you shall be careful to do, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land the Lord your God swore to your fathers. I stopped there in the first 5 books. I didn't bother to go through the whole Testament. But also Malachi 2:15, did he not make them one, and with a portion of the Spirit in their union? And what was the one God seeking? Godly offspring. So guard yourselves in your spirit, and let none of you be faithless to the wife of your youth. Context there is divorce, dealing treacherously with the wife of your youth. The emphasis, why does God make the two one? He makes the two one that he may obtain godly offspring. This is what God is after, godly offspring. Not just offspring, godly offspring. And this is why, when you evaluate in life why you're here, whether you're single or you're married, being fruitful, multiplying is part of the mission. For Paul, that played out by being a missionary who was single, and he preached the gospel. And he did it free of charge. He did it to serve, because he was about multiplying godly seed in an evangelistic sense. For the married person, so many people, even Christians live for the hope of one day retiring, seeing the world, going to the golf course, being in the fishing bass boat. Man, this is not our mission. We're called to be fruitful and multiply. And so when we read this law, and it shocks us at how severe it sees, we don't see how serious it is, how big of a life purpose this is, to be fruitful and multiply. Whether it be through serving the kingdom of God, contributing to missions, being missional in our workplace with our neighbors, or it be in having children. It's a serious thing. I mean, I'm not saying that it's always wrong to have a vasectomy or to have tubes tied. I understand that some people face very serious health crisis. Some women, if they get pregnant again, they're facing maybe death. There's different health reasons. There's reasons why people have to have hysterectomies or injuries occur. But I'm more addressing the fact that very casually people are very happy with having one child, two children, and saying, okay, one for me, one for you. Praise the Lord, now we're through, which is the whole Vodi Bakum line. Very memorable. And I don't think, I think if you read this verse, if you're on a desert island and all you have is the Bible, is that a normal view of children? Is that a normal view of the family? Is it a normal view of what your purpose and meaning in life is? And the answer, I think, is clearly no. And yet many people, because it's true, you're more children. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a strenuous life to have particularly if you're going to do one income versus the dual income. I've known people like, well, we're just going to travel the world and go see the world and go on vacations all the time and live in a big house. Yeah, you could do that. But at the end of your life, you know, what is that? What is that worth? I've joked with my kids that, you know, if I had less than them, I could have had a 3-car garage sooner, you know. But I'm joking. It's very clear I'm joking because my children are my treasure. And I said very early in my marriage and my life, I would rather be poor and have godly offspring than be exceedingly rich and either not have children or have them be ungodly. And that worldview made me willing to make economic sacrifices for the sake of having children and trying to give them a godly education. And I'm not trying to put anybody into a mold like I understand different people. Some people can't have children. Some people can't homeschool. I get that. I understand that. But all I'm talking about here is your priorities. What is our priority? Comments? Sam? You want to hand Sam Belay the mic?
Yeah, you just mentioned earlier about the, you know, how it's joked about, or commonly joked about thing that, you know, that just is universal. It's funny, you know, people think it's hilarious.
Hold that up to your mouth a little closer.
People think it's just funny that, you know, if you get kicked, oh, that's just universally funny. Well, it's interesting that if you think about everything that God calls good, has been under attack in that sense, and it always starts with humor. I think Satan has that as a tool that's very smart, because if you think about it, if you believe something, if somebody jokes about it, you can't necessarily be angry with it because it's just a joke. They don't mean anything by it. But in reality, there's meaning behind the joke. And each time you hear a joke about whatever it be, like, you know, the TV shows with the useless dads, or the TV shows showing the annoying children, or marriage being just such a joke and so it's such a terrible thing in reality, a nagging wife and all that. You know, homosexuality being thrown in there as a joke. All those things are things that God called good, that is being twisted into this, yeah, but really in reality, and everybody relates to the joke part of it because they just connect that negativity to it. And that's how I think Satan infiltrates that negativity into today's stuff, where it's blatantly against. You watch TV shows that's blatantly against having children, and now it's blatantly against men, and you know, all the way for homosexuality. And you can see the gradual twist of, it started as a little humor just to make you laugh a little bit, and now it's just full on, yep, we pushed our total view, whether, you know, be the media and Satan working with it or wherever. It's so obvious how it's changed through the years, and just, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years. Just interesting.
Yeah, I think you're onto something too. There really is a hatred of men in Hollywood, and you see it not just with that, which I don't know, maybe just universally found funny and humorous, unless somebody is actually severely hurt. I can't think of a female equivalent to that, though. I can't. It's just not cool. You don't make jokes about women getting hurt in the same way. But also just all the TV shows, as you're pointing out, but even before you said it, I was thinking it as you started off, where the father's an idiot, the children are smart, the father's an idiot, the wife's smart, The dad's just kind of a big dope, you know. God wants to undermine the family. Not God. Satan wants to undermine the family. And it's very important that we capture that back, because and laws like this help us to renew our mind and go, oh, okay, culturally, the culture is bent in a certain direction, but God's word is the opposite of that. Because Satan doesn't want us to be fruitful and multiply. He hates children. He loves abortion. He loves human sacrifice, and he loves emasculation. He loves, like, look at how transgenderism, which is no such thing as transgenderism, just mutilation of little boys and little girls. And there's a huge push for it in our society. Where did this insanity come from, Satan? It obviously existed in the ancient world, because, like the verse that brought up earlier in what was it, chapter 22 or whatever, that people were making eunuchs back then, and for various purposes and various reasons. But Satan loves it. God, I think, forbids it, and we should be anti. The other thing on this Amendment 3 thing is it's not just the most radical pro-infant murder bill that we've ever seen. It's also tax-funded transgender surgery and all kinds of stuff. So this is an issue, and the church needs to read this case law and go, oh, this is a serious thing. Those doctors ought to have their hands cut off. You know, this is a horrible thing that's happening, and a lot of these people that have undergone surgeries and such are regretting it and wishing they could have it. You know, they're not. They didn't become a male. They didn't become a female. They just became a gelding that can never ever fulfill that potential calling to be fruitful and multiply biologically. It's terribly sad. So this law also, you look at that's another thing. When you look at this law and its modern application, it's far more than the civil consequence that, you know, we may or may not one day implement. Because I actually think that in this situation, there compassion and sympathy would most of the time, but the woman would get a very strong reprimand and maybe a financial penalty. But most people wouldn't want to see someone's hand cut off. But by stating the law this way, it says, listen, folks, this is serious. Being fruitful and multiplying is serious stuff. So think twice before you just casually say, oh, yeah, I'm going to get the snip. Okay, well, think really hard before you do that. I am not saying you never should be done. I will say that abortifacient drugs should never be done. It's murder, ever. But I do think that there's times to wait, to prevent in various ways, that there's some discretion there. But really, if when people are just like, oh, we don't want to have children, really? You just don't? Why is that? Answer the question, why is that? Well, because my wife could die if she gets pregnant. Oh, okay. All right, I get that. But if it's just, oh, because we want to live it up, you're selfish. Repent of your selfish, lazy, egotistical, self-centered way of life. If you just want to indefinitely, and I understand people saying, well, we want some spacing between children, or we want to wait a while, or, you know, whatever. Okay, that's, you know, you can prayerfully make those decisions. I don't want to say you should never do that, but really think about it. Think if you're just a selfish, self-centered person, because we're not called to be selfish, self-centered people. You know, that I would say. We're not called to be selfish. We're called to lay down our life, pick up our cross, follow him, and we're saved to serve. And I tell you, having children is a servant life, and it's very hard. It is hard work, and it is sacrifice. It is strenuous. It is hard on bodies. It does mean loss of sleep. You know, it does. But man, the rewards are just incredible. Thoughts? Okay. Some more biblical values here. Psalm 127, 3 through 5. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The Levirate was about heritage of land. But here, it's not the land, it's the child themselves are a heritage from the Lord, from Yahweh. The fruit of the womb, a reward. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. So, you know, when you're dealing with a bunch of toddlers, you know, if you 3 children under 5, and you know you might have or under 4, and there you might have multiple ones in diapers, and wives in particular want an adult conversation. Which, you know, I think that that Church of the Word, you know, ladies can get together. This is the kind of thing we need community knowledge on how to stay healthy, how to have healthy kids. It's good when women get together and talk about healthy pregnancy and healthy fertility and how to keep from doing damage to your teeth. I think there's need for research, and I you know, one thing, we have various teeth issues in our family. And I think one of the things that we did is we've had water filter for a long time. We didn't want to have a bunch of fluoride and arsenic in our water, a lot of the stuff that's in our water supply. So we had good filtration systems for a lot of years, but we weren't putting minerals back in it. If you don't put minerals back in it, then you may be depleting your body of minerals. And so when women go through pregnancy, a lot of the nutrients that would go to their body is now going to the baby. And so women have bad teeth and get bone issues. You know, those are things that ought to be talked about. And when you find solutions, research it, figure it out, and hope to prevent those things. And yeah, men, I think, need to be as helpful as they can with their wives, especially when they have a bunch of young children. When the older ones get older, they help with the younger ones. Everybody likes to give up after 3, but actually that's when the older ones start really helping with the younger ones in our experience. You have older children that can help do all sorts of things. Helps you raise mature kids too, mature, capable children. They mature very fast when they have little children to help take care of. So it's good for the older ones to have young siblings. I don't think it's very good for children to be an only child. I really don't. I have 5 siblings, but my youngest sister's 10, almost 11 years older than me. And so, you know, you don't have to, I was, for some of my childhood, I was almost like an only child. It's good for children to have to share a bedroom, get along with people, serve one another. It's good for them. So having a large family, or what our culture calls a large family, it's good for kids. You say, well, I want more time to spend with my one little kid or my 2 kids. You're much more likely to spoil them and make them lazy and make them unhappy. Don't get me wrong, if God just gives you one child, gives you one. Therefore, all the more reason to be careful to say, well, I've got one child, which, like I said, I was the baby, and I have a baby. You're always going to have a baby. Be very intentional about teaching them to work, teaching them to serve, and teaching them to share, because it's just something that happens automatically when you have multiples. But, you know, we are where we are, and we have what we have, and not everybody can have children. Not everybody gets married. I'm not trying to put guilt on anybody or anything else. I'm more wanting to address a culture that says, well, it's bad for children to have more than 1 child or 2 child or 3 children. That's what I'm wanting to address. I'm not trying to heap condemnation on anybody or make people discontent. I'm just saying there is a selfish attitude in our culture that hates children. And that's a problem. I think it's a problem. Ryan? Yeah, go ahead there. She's got the microphone.
One thing I thought about reading this verse is we're supposed to evangelize and weaponize our children against the false pagan gods this world is bringing to our doorstep. You know, you want a brother next to you who's actually going to lay down their life for Christ. Who better than your own child? Who better than their grandchild?
Yep. And you're applying that to Psalm 127? Mm-hmm. Evangelize and weaponize. I love it. Yeah, and that's good. Evangelize and weaponize, because they will not be ashamed. They will speak with their enemies in the gate. You know, it's like, okay, since 1973, People have been having abortions like crazy in our country. But even the church has greatly limited the family. Suppose we hadn't. Suppose Christians continued to have 5, 6, 7, 8 children or whatever since 1973. We'd run everything. We'd run everything. If we had had that many children and discipled them for Christ, the political situation, totally different. You'd have much, much better options than the candidates we presently have. So, well, we can't go back in time. What do we got to do? We got to start now. The Muslims are very intentional. They're having, on average, like the first generation, like 8 kids, and they're taking over Europe. They have a plan to take over Europe, and they're doing it. And they know it. And their goal is to put Europe under Sharia law. You know, I'm going to say this. It might be shocking to you, but the concept of jihad, before it was, which is an Arabic word, before it was an a Muslim concept, where do you find it? You find it in the Great Commission. Jihad means struggle. Now, the word of God doesn't spread by putting a sword to people's. The Bible's very clear. The sword of the Spirit, right? We put on the helmet of salvation. We don't go out and threaten people to convert. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is the Great Commission is to go and teach all nations. Take the gospel to the ends of the earth and teach all nations to observe all things he has commanded us. And I would say that's old and new, because Jesus is the one who speaks to Moses through the burning bush and other times, to observe all things he's commanded us. The idea that the gospel is to go to the nations, that all the nations are to be taught the word of God, how to love your wives, how to love your children, and yes, what justice is as well. So being fruitful and multiplying is very important to that, and you see this concept even in Psalm 127. They're going to speak with their enemies in the gates. What was the gate? Well, the place of commerce, the place of real estate transactions, the place of civil judgment, where Absalom said, oh, if I were the judge, I would hear your case. You sound right. And he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. It was where the judgment, it was where justice took place. It was outside the city gates where the stoning took place. It was right outside the gates where the city market was. It's where they bought the field of Anathoth in the book of Jeremiah. To possess the gates is to possess the control center of the city. That's what it means to control the gates. We need our children in the gates. We need Christian lawyers, Christian judges, Christian statesmen, Christian CEOs, Christian every area of life. We need godly dog catchers, right? The godly dog catcher says, well, it is a dog. It's not a human being. Nobody wants, God's word applies to everything, right on down to the dog catcher. All right, it's 8:04. Any final thoughts? Okay. In that case, Timotheus, why don't you close us in prayer?